Todd, what are your impressions on this 5th anniversary?
Well, first off, I'd say it's hard to believe that 5 years have passed already since the last time we were covering the story. 9/11 had such a profound effect on world history and how many people saw the world, and yet in the days just after the attacks, it was really impossible to know what was happening. There was just so much going on all at the same time. We want to start with some images of some of the people that we met, some of the things we saw 5 years ago. We arrived in New York City the day after the attacks. The gaping hole in Lower Manhattan was billowing smoke and ash, the remains of all those crushed buildings. Much of the city seemed normal in an eerie sort of way. As you move deeper, though, into Lower Manhattan, the disbelief and stunned looks grew. Arriving near Ground Zero, we saw soldiers, police, Red Cross, and volunteers, and many Canadians, like this team of young doctors from the Royal Victoria Hospital.
We've been working primarily in the triage camp that's just about a block and a half at sort of the foot of Tower 7's rubble. It's unbelievable. It's horrific.
They were here to do what they knew best, saving whatever lives they could.
You feel a lot of sorrow because they're placing so much trust in you and they're placing so much hope in you. You wish you could deliver more results.
This Ontario provincial policeman with his dog and his flag was here too, ready to help search for survivors.
If I was under there, I wouldn't want anybody to quit.
The World Trade Center buildings were just about 5 blocks in that direction. We were a small team at Ground Zero, a cameraman, a producer, and myself. We focused on the rescue efforts and tried to put real faces to 9/11. To be honest, the experience was raw, intense, and deeply emotional. The New Yorkers we met kept gazing up at a skyline changed forever.
Yeah, I mean, they were huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's no place you could be that you didn't see them.
Twice the height of the Woolworth building
Which
there.
is right over there.
That's the one with the point.
And each citizen wanted to tell us, in their own way, about their city.
It's like New York is existing in the 4th dimension. Everything seems the same, yet everything is skewed.
And people just overwhelmed and exhausted, and I mean the magnitude of it all is just incredible.
One night near a Manhattan hospital, there was Tracy Woodall. Her husband had worked at the World Trade Center.
And I know that they'll find him. It's just taking time. I just don't want them to stop looking.
Tracy never found her husband. She didn't know at the time, though, that she was pregnant. She later gave birth to a baby girl.
It's keeping us away from that stuff and working on the areas that are stable.
In those few days, we saw the story of a city and a country both humbled by terrorism, but also the story of everyday people pulling together, a part of themselves. And there really were so many individual stories like those ones in the days and weeks after the attacks. Coming back 5 years later, we found a former Montrealer who was here during 9/11, still lives in New York City. We wanted to talk to him a bit to get his perspective and see things through his eyes on this 5th anniversary. Every time Eamon Deagle has friends or family come visit, this is where he brings them, the Brooklyn Boardwalk. With the famous bridge overhead, from here you can see where they once stood, the Twin Towers no longer there.
You could just see the plume of smoke stretching all the way down into northern Jersey, and that was where I really realized the immensity of the burning that was going on.
Like millions of people from New York, the day is seared in his mind. He watched the planes, the flames, the collapse from his office window in New Jersey.
One of my concerns was my wife had flown out that very morning from the airport, and my first worry was that she was on one of those planes.
Eamon took us next to Ground Zero, a place loaded with symbolism and scars. He hopes they never rebuild anything here except maybe a park.
I would like to see just trees and grass and some place where you can meditate. This attack should mean something for us, and that it makes us better people rather than worse people.
A former Quebecer who moved here in the 1990s, Eamon says his adopted city is bigger than any single event, no matter how traumatic. And in a way, he's right. Economically, New York is stronger than ever. Many people here seem to have gotten on with their lives. Like Eamon, terrorism doesn't shape their day-to-day world.
New Yorkers have always been a good tribe to belong to, and so many interesting people keep coming to the city and revitalizing it.
But there's more cynicism nowadays. You see protests against the war in Iraq at Ground Zero, and 9/11 conspiracy theorists who blame their own government. I asked Eamon what he thought the lessons of 9/11 were, and he told me it would take many more anniversaries to know for sure. But he hoped the search for answers had at least begun.
Why do intelligent people fly planes into buildings.
Back home in Brooklyn, far from the frenzy of Ground Zero, Eamon and his wife take their little daughter to a neighborhood birthday party. She's just 4 years old, born after 9/11. And so for her at least, what happened that day across the bridge is still a million miles away. And at the center of all of this is Ground Zero, where I'm standing. This morning, those who died here were honored. New York, of course, remains in a state of high alert today, understandably. Yet there's also a vibrancy in this city that's clear and unmistakable, almost as if the place is healing on the road to recovery. And so in the end, 9/11 is certainly one story, but the recovery is another story, an ongoing one, and certainly one that speaks to the human spirit. Back to you in Montreal.
Thank you very much, Todd.